Hello friends! We're counting down to the holidays with 12 days of Christmas drawings. The goal of this mini-series is to kickstart a daily habit of painting in Procreate in a fun, low-pressure way. So I invite you to grab your pencil, get comfy, and draw along with me. Today we're going to be painting this adorable snowman. Let's first create a new canvas, and I have mine set to 4,250 pixels wide by 3,200 pixels tall at 300 dpi. These are essentially the dimensions of the iPad, so the canvas should fit your screen. If you don't have enough storage on your iPad for a file this large, you can use the pre-formatted screen size canvas, which will give you the same aspect ratio, but at a smaller size and lower resolution. I drew the sketch in bed one night, so I didn't film the process, but I'll show you a quick glimpse of how it came together. I sketched with the 6B pencil brush, which you can find in Procreate's classic brush library. Now you're welcome to draw a version of this snowman in your own style, or you can skip the drawing process altogether because I created a template for you, which you can use as a guide for this painting. There's a link in the description for the free download. And I just want to mention, with the downloads, you'll also receive a color palette, which you can import directly into Procreate. The palette includes the base colors that I'll be using, but you'll often see me incorporate other colors as well. Feel free to add to or adjust the base palette as you see fit. You can pull up the classic view to make adjustments to any of these colors, or you can create new colors by pulling up the color disc and making your selections there. This time I'm going to use a template so you can see that process step by step. First, let me just turn off my sketch. Now you're going to go to the Actions menu, make sure to tap Add, then tap Insert a Photo. If you've already downloaded and saved the template, you should find it in your camera roll. Now go to that template layer, tap the N, and change the blending mode to Multiply. Then reduce the opacity enough so that you can see the template, but it's not too bold and distracting. Create a new layer and make sure you drag it below the template layer. The first thing we're going to do is change the background color. The snowman will be in white, of course, so we need a bit of color in the background so it will be easier to see. So let's go to that background layer, and I'm going to choose the icy blue from the palette. Now pull up the Procreate library, go to the Pastels set, and we're going to choose Overland, which is near the bottom of the list. Choose white. I've got my brush set to about 24%, and we'll start by outlining the face and the body. Then increase the brush size and fill with color. I'm filling manually because this brush has great texture and I don't want to lose that by using the color drop feature. Now let's ink the hat. Create a new layer. Again, make sure it's below the template layer, and I'm actually going to name these layers so I can keep them organized. Then choose a color for your hat. I'm going with the spruce green from the palette. Again, you're going to outline the shape, then fill. You may need to adjust your brush size so you have more control in smaller areas. It might be helpful to turn off the template layer so it's easier to see how things are looking. Okay, so now I can see that this brush is actually a little bit transparent. You see the overlapping strokes there? So I'll just add a couple more layers of color so that the overlapping isn't quite so obvious. Okay, let's turn the template back on. And I'm staying on this hat layer, and I'm going to choose a darker green. I'm using the Holly green from the palette. Now we can create some separation by adding a line of shadow between the hat and the pom-pom. You can also add a little shadow on the left side as well. We'll do the same here, add a line of shadow to create some separation between the hat and the fold. And there'll be some shadow here along the bottom of the fold, so let's add the darker green there too. And while we're here, let's add those lines in the fold as well. All right, turn off the template layer again, let's have a look. Okay, we don't want these lines to be quite so stark, so increase the brush size and then add a few light strokes to soften those areas. Do the same thing on the fold, just add some of that texture next to each of those lines. Now let's go back to that spruce green, choose the color disc view, and find a lighter version of that color. I think that'll work. Now use this lighter color to add a few strokes for highlights. Okay, the hat layer's done. Let's turn the template back on, and now let's tackle the scarf. I'm on a new layer. I'm using the red from the palette, and I've got my brush size at about 10%. So we're essentially going to do the same thing here. We're going to outline and fill the entire shape first, then come back to add the shadows and details. You're welcome to make the brush size even smaller if you feel like it will give you a bit more control, but I like the fact that at this size you can really see those textured edges on the strokes, so it gives that soft woolly vibe. For the fringe, I've dropped the brush size down to about 5%, and here you can just use light, loose strokes to draw those lines. Okay, choose a darker red. I'm using the deep red from the palette, and now we can add the lines of shadow. First, add a line here where the scarf folds over, then a line at the top, and here the line of shadow will be on this side, since this end of the scarf is tucked under. This side will also be darker, and we can actually bring it down along this edge as well. There will be some shadow here where this fold is happening, and then we can also add a little on the left side along the bottom of this section. Okay, now turn the template off and we'll soften those lines just like we did with the hat. Increase the brush size and just add a few light strokes so that that texture shows through. Turn the template back on, drop the brush size down, and we'll use more defined strokes to add those lines. Let's see how that looks without the template. Oh, I forgot to add these lines here. And I think I'll add a few light strokes along some of these lines as well, just to help soften them. All right, let's paint the little twigs for arms. Tap on the base layer where you painted the snowman shape, and then create a new layer right above it. Choose a brown. I'm going to use one from an older palette. Drop the size of the brush down to about 5 or 6%, and you'll just follow the shape of the twigs. You want the twigs to look fairly natural, so don't make your lines too straight or overly angular. And if you use light strokes, it'll help the grain become more visible. Remember, we're on a layer below the scarf, so the twig on this side will automatically appear in the background. Now you can just go ahead and ink the buttons. I'm using the spruce green from the palette, and I'm doing this on a separate layer. Then I'll add the darker green for the shadows. Now for the face, let's create a new layer. And for the nose, let's use the coral from the palette. Again, we're going to outline, then fill the shape. I'm going to create a slightly darker version of that color by dragging the little circle down and to the right. And we can use that for a line of shadow along the bottom edge of the nose and for those little lines. For the eyes and mouth, I'm going to use the same brown that I used for the twigs. The nice thing about this brush is that it has a slight taper to it. So if you start your line fairly light and then increase the pressure, the size of the stroke will change, which is perfect for drawing the eyes. See how the line goes from skinny to thick? The smile is pretty straightforward, just follow those lines. And I think it would be cute to give him a couple rosy cheeks. I'm going to do this on a new layer just in case it doesn't work out. Okay, I'm going to increase the brush size and decrease the opacity on the brush because we want the color to be quite subtle. Using the side of the pencil tip and a really light touch, create a circle on each cheek. Then you can use the smudge tool in the same brush to soften it up a bit more. Let's add a tiny bit of shading on the body of the snowman. Choose a really light cream or off-white color. And then let's go down to the base layer, and we're going to paint the shadows directly on that layer. We're just going to add a bit of that darker color along the left side and along the bottom edge to create some shading. Maybe add a little below the scarf and under the hat as well. The last thing we're going to do is add a little shadow below this little guy. Create a new layer and drag it below the base layer so that it's at the bottom of your layer stack. Choose a color that's slightly darker than the color you used for the background. Bump the brush size all the way up to 100% and drop the opacity down to around 70%. Start with an oval shape, and you can add a few strokes here and there to adjust the shape so it's not so uniform and perfect. Now we're going to create a kind of halo of shadow around him to help separate the shape from the background. So just draw an outline on both sides. Then switch to the smudge tool and blend away that edge so you have a nice subtle transition. All right, there's our sweet little snowman. I hope you had fun with this process, and I hope you'll join me for all 12 days of this holiday painting practice. There's a link in the description for where you can download the free drawing templates and get a peek at all the drawings we'll be creating for the next 12 days. I've also added a link to the 12 Days of Christmas Drawings playlist so you can easily find all the content in this series. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love if you'd give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.